Hello, hello, welcome. It's so good to have you here today.
It's so wonderful to be here with you, Kris.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. Tell me about yourself and what do you do and how did you find your way to this work?
So I like to describe myself as an erotic mystic, which means that I'm most interested in, excited by, and love inspiring and awakening other people to the sacred dimension of our sexuality. So often when people think about sex or wanting to explore sexuality, they're coming from a place of problem, right? Like something's not working and they want to try and understand it and get better at it, yeah? And this is one gateway often for people into sexuality explorations. But there's a whole other dimension to our sexuality and our sexual energy that brings us into awakening, yeah, that awakens our consciousness and brings us into intimate relationship, not just with ourselves or one another, but actually with existence, or what I like to call all that is. So, what I get particularly just up about is inviting people into this possibility that our sexual energy is not just something that happens within our physical body, but something which, in fact, can be fuel for our awakening and take us into a deeper, richer relationship with the beyond what we already know, beyond who we think we are. And you asked how I got into the work, and really, as long as I can remember, I think as long as I was aware that there was this kind of sex thing or, kind of felt pleasure and aliveness in my body, I had a deep, deep fascination with it. And this kind of went alongside my spiritual path. Again, from even when I was a child, I wanted to know God, and I wanted to know myself as God. I did grow up in a Catholic environment, and I knew that what I was being taught at church was not it. And I had this, burning desire in me to really, yeah, know myself and to know God. So there was my spiritual path, and there was a path of exploring energy and aliveness. And I always had a lot of that in myself. People, when they met me, they would always say, wow, there's kind of something about you. There's something about the way that you are, which makes me be more me. And so I was holding a curiosity for a very, very long time around what is my purpose? Like, what am I truly here to express? And I trained in many different modalities around energy work, healing, body work, coaching, different kind of therapies. And although I was good at all of that stuff, I knew that it was not my deepest purpose. I knew there was something else that I was here to do. And that finally took me into the world of sexuality, called conscious sexuality, sacred sexuality. And when I arrived there, I was like, yeah, this is it. I was a duck to water of everything that I did. It just felt so natural and innate to me. And so I stepped in, I did various trainings and stepped into offering sexuality based sessions. And like the moment I was in the room with somebody, usually a man, I work predominantly with men, supporting them in their sexuality. But it's like as soon as I was in that space, something just moved through me. And I just knew what to do. I knew how to be in a way that I didn't feel in the other environments. And now I would say, I call this the archetype of the initiatrix. So I feel, especially for people in female bodies, we have a very particular kind of calling to support others in being initiated into the mysteries of existence through the body. And so that archetype of the initiatrix just moved through me, and some people might call her the high priestess or the goddess, however we want to imagine it. But there was something that was there for me that just guided me. actually in the work. And I've been journeying with her for the last 13 years.
Wow, that's incredible. There's so much to touch on everywhere there, but I love the way that you speak about it. I see pieces of myself in you, but also just like this idea of like also I knew that God wasn't what they were like what they were showing us in the Catholic Church. I just love that like and really touching on the idea that like sexuality and spirituality are like mirrored paths and they are one and the same in so many places. And I think that's what a lot of people are starting to wake up to. But yeah, that like the way again that you speak about it, it just makes it so clear. Like, of course they're linked, of course they're the same. And the fact that you're able to access this like deep truth about yourself through your sexuality, through this space is just incredible. So
Yeah,
thank you so much.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And I actually just feel to offer as well, like for people who are listening or watching, that God can be such a loaded term, right? Especially if you've come from a kind of Christian religious background. We got this personification of this guy in the sky looking down upon us, and there can be this judgmental God that we carry a lot of shame around our sexuality. Like the programming of this stuff is incredibly deep. But for me, when I use the word God, it could be synonymous with love. It could be the same thing as creation. It could be source. It could be light. I mean, really, is all and beyond these things. And God for me is a word that particularly resonates and sits with me. But don't anybody get hung up on that word and think, well, I don't believe in God, it can't be for me. Just put source or love in its place and you'll come to exactly the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of it as like that thing that feels so true, that feels like it's just beyond like reason and like this veil of reality. Like it's just beyond that. It could be like this deep truth about the universe. Yeah, it could be like the pure source of love itself. It could be the universal soul. It's just something that feels so freaking true and just beyond what we can really comprehend. And something that maybe you've touched a little bit when you've like gone into pleasure states or maybe taking psychedelics, right? Like it's right there. It's beyond the veil. We can touch it, but like just not sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were chatting before, you had this beautiful way of looking at kind of like the most important lessons, because you did say you worked predominantly with men and men's
Mm.
sexuality. So I'm so interested to know about like what are the key things that you've learned about men's sexuality, how it shows up, and how like, yeah, what do people need to know about men's sexuality?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would love people to know is there is so much vulnerability to the male experience. And that vulnerability actually gets no airtime in the standard story of sex. So, like the mainstream narrative that we have about who a man is, what a man wants, and how a man sexes just does not give any space to, in fact, what a vulnerable experience it is for a man to show up in as a sexual being. Yeah. And in fact, it's like men themselves, I think they feel it at some level, but they don't necessarily have the language for it. And so they tend to go into one or two of two patterns. Either they try to like perform and bravado the whole thing out, yeah, and kind of go into a lot of rigidity and forcing and pushing around sex, or they go more into a kind of collapse and lose their masculinity, their virility, their drive, their oomph, because they just don't know how to be able to show up in an authentic way. So we're in this kind of place and time actually where it's a real struggle for men to know what their authentic sexual self is and to show up in relating in that way. They're often stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's like we want them to initiate and to take the lead, but they shouldn't be pushy or a predator. Yeah. We want them to like be able to show up with really juicy masculine energy, And be sensitive and caring and tender at the same time. You know, they shouldn't go too fast, they shouldn't go too slow. They should only have an erection at a very specific window of time, and having an erection outside of that time is embarrassing, humiliating, and like the cock's got a mind of its own. And so, like, men get all these conflicting, very contradictory messages about how to show up. And so when all of that is going on in your head and you're trying to get it just right, then it's like it's very hard to, in fact, be in the body or enjoying or feeling any pleasure in your experience. And so this is what I see in so many men. It's like actually they're not experiencing very much pleasure. They don't know how to receive pleasure and open to it. And they're running to the script of how a man needs to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
yeah,
mean, that
yeah,
that just like, oh my gosh, that reminds me so much of what it's like to be a woman, where it's like, "Oh my gosh, you need to be this, you need to be this, you need to be this, you
right.
need to be this,
And
you have
women,
to."
we have our own version of this as well, right? We have our own version of it. And yeah, and the place that I've particularly chosen to pour my energy and attention and skill and expertise is in supporting the men. Because yeah, there's not so many women doing that. I know lots of female practitioners who work with women, who support female erotic empowerment. I see lots of women claiming their power, claiming their pleasure, learning how to claim their bodies, right? And the guys are getting quite left behind, I would say, in this.
Personally, like, yeah, I was like, "Oh my gosh, how can I not serve men in this work? I really want to." And also, it's really hard. Like, there's a difficulty there that I feel that, like, I'm open to that maybe my work will one day evolve into serving, like, men equally as women or even just concentrating on men, but, like, there's just this deep knowing that I understand women and their struggles and sexuality. Whereas with men, it's like I have to bridge this gap and I don't fully like embody it and understand it in that like deep knowing kind of way.
Mm,
So I'm so curious how you came to know that like this was your calling to work with men.
right. I mean, I think one of the key elements for me is that I have always really loved men and male company and being around masculine energy. And so even, when I was much younger, like I was always hanging out with the guys. And in fact, not that I was a tomboy, I was always very, kind of feminine, but I was very accepted by men and had groups of male friends, and sometimes I would be the only woman within that group. And I don't know, maybe life just constructed it that way so that I would get this real understanding of men. When I started sexuality work, one of the rules that I gave to myself was that if in the work I found my heart hardening to men, through the work, because there is a lot of distortion that in our world, in our culture. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what sacred sexuality could be, and so I was aware of that, or the transactional nature of the relationship. It's like, okay, if that affects me and changes me, and I feel like I'm losing the love that I naturally have in my heart for men, I will stop. I will stop immediately, because that's not what I want for myself. And actually, it's been the opposite. It's like my love, my compassion, my care for men has just grown and grown. And I think it's like with men, they can feel in my presence that there's both acceptance and love, actually. I feel this is what so many men are longing for, is like to be loved into their magnificence, to be loved into their best self, because mostly they feel like they're just getting it wrong, and they're carrying a lot of shame around being a man, being in a male body, being a sexual being. And so with me, they just get this really pure transmission of see you in your highest potential. I see you in yourself and I accept you as you are, which does not come without its boundaries. And I'm very good at truth speaking as well. And actually, that's part of what creates safety in space, because I'm able to deliver clear reflection and truth speaking, but without the charge of shame that many men might have felt before. And that's just something that, yeah, that's kind of that's come through, who I am basically, and the space that I hold. Yeah. I do feel for anybody, who works with men, it's so important to really be holding that love and just a real awareness of what I would call the innate innocence of every human being. Like, even in the distortion, to be able to hold the true innocence that is there behind it all, because that's where the real healing comes in.
Yeah, and actually, like, that brings up a really strong memory for me that, like, I had a partner that, like, he really deeply wanted to be accepted in all that he was, and I thought that I was. I thought that I was able to hold him in all his complexities and accept him for however he showed up that day, but there was actually limits to that. There was places where I was having a lot of difficulty, connecting with him when he was, like, really, really sad, for instance, and, like, couldn't move through that sadness very quickly, and, like, that's just one example between us that was really, really difficult, but there was places that he would go where I just had difficulty connecting and difficulty seeing him as that, like, beautiful, innocent being that, like, when I truly went to my highest self, I could see that, and I could put his head in my lap and stroke his hair and, like, just be that kind of, like, mothering figure for him. So, yeah, I guess what would you say to women who are having trouble connecting with their partners if this is a heterosexual relationship? Like, how could they help engage with men's sexuality in a healthy way?
Yeah, great question. And actually, I think it's also just really valuable to say that there is a big difference between being a practitioner and the space that we hold, which has a very clear beginning and end, and being a partner, right? So if anybody's sitting there going, "Oh my God, I'm just like not good enough at doing this thing because I wasn't able to find that compassion," right? It is different when we move it into our personal life, and the ultimate that we want to hold is like, how can I hold that unconditional love, yet still have the conditional, like, to still get our needs met in relating, right? Because this is part of the challenge between men and women, especially in these times. So there's a couple of things that I feel are really valuable as, like, just very simple foundations in relating that I don't see people necessarily putting in place at the start. So, it's like I think learning the skills of intimacy and relating is best done when everything is good in your relating. Like, especially at the beginning. It's like, start exploring some tools and skills when things are good and you can find a language to meet one another. Because usually, when things start to go wobbly or the shit hits the fan, that is the worst time to try and discover this stuff, because there's already so much there and it's charged and it's loaded. And usually, we're like, both gone into our child modes and triggered and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's like, start exploring this stuff together. And I would say this is more than male sexuality, but this is a kind of going to be a doorway to it also, is creating space where it's safe for a man to bring his vulnerability. And so I'm going to share a practice. Actually, I've just been teaching a couples retreat, which was stunning. It was like 5 days. And it was around tantra massage, and people think they come to learn all the sexy skills, and yeah, we do that stuff, but I'm also teaching them really simple communication stuff so that we can hold the space for one another. So this is one of the practices that I teach, and it's called "What is here now?" What is here now? And you simply, with your partner, like, you set a timer for 10 minutes and you take turns to ask one another, what's here? And by here, I don't mean like here, but what here, the inside bit. So many men are like, are not as practiced as women in noticing like what's actually happening inside. And then you name in one word a sensation or a feeling that you have, you know? So I might say, what is here now? Excitement. And then we swap, what is here now? Anxiety. What is here now? Heat. Yeah. And we just go back and forth like this. And we basically, through this practice, we get used to, firstly, like naming what's going on inside, but also hearing and witnessing our partner without going into story, explanation, or justification. Yeah, without getting in a trip, basically, about what's going on inside them and just like being able to hear it. And it's like when we practice this as a specific thing, like later in, just as we're in life, in those moments where you sense like, oh, there's something going on, it's such a beautiful question to be able to ask somebody. So rather than saying, what's wrong? Or what's your problem? Or something like that, which already puts us on the back foot and makes us kind of feel defensive and shut down, kind of, and then you just get fine, fine, like nothing, kind of response. It's like, what is here now? It gives us this little bit of space and it's just like, ouch is here now. And it's like, oh, right. And it's like we can feel this stuff, but then it just gives us a gateway into meeting one another without the kind of, the judgment or the charge or the pressure that can be there. And so in this spaciousness, we start to just develop more fluidity with one another in our emotions. And one of the biggest challenges for men is like through the conditioning that they have is like that there's often a real rigidity around kind of identity and emotional range. And this then translates into sex. There's a rigidity in sex because they're kind of forced to be like that. This is what a man is. So when we create a space together which allows more fluidity, that creates more space, more fluidity when we come to intimacy as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and I love love that you talk about, like, a tantra massage, tantra couples work, and you immediately go to communication. Because
Right.
yeah, it's so funny that, like, "Okay, I'm gonna teach you tantra, come on in, we're gonna" like, "Oh, yeah, we're gonna learn some sexy skills," and then it's like, "Okay, so first communication, we're gonna spend so long talking about communication." And I know it doesn't sound sexy, but trust me, this is tantra because it literally is. Because that's like, okay, first I'm going to teach you like a framework and give you a way to deepen intimacy with your partner through words, but also through emotions and sensations. Because like sex doesn't happen in the mind, it happens in the body. And so, yeah, when that disconnection happens, like so much of like my personal work has to do with connecting people's bodies back to their intuition and back to their inner knowing and to bypass the mind, be able to live in the body, like experience life through those impulses. And that's when you have the most magical sex.
Exactly. Exactly. And and it was so interesting because actually after the first full day on this retreat, one of the women, she was like, actually, if I left this retreat now, I would already have had so much because for the first time I've got a language with which to communicate with my partner around like, like what's here and also just what feels good to me and to be received in that without defensiveness and shut down. Like I know what I'm doing, and actually to have learned how to just be in curiosity and exploration with one another, which then moves us into playfulness, aliveness, and a true meeting in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that curiosity is so key. Like one of my main tenets is always like curiosity over judgment, but also like what if you could approach every single sexual interaction with this beginner's mindset of like I wonder what's here. And just like you said, like what are you noticing? What's here? Like that is the most important question, so open-ended, so like okay, tell me what is present for you right now, and don't go into story, and like even encouraging people to like come back into presence if they're like, well, in the past or like yesterday or last week. It's like, no, 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 what's here right now. And so I'm curious also, like you spoke before about like that power being something that comes from the inside and that like healthy relationship with yourself. And where do you see that being, like, is that something that men experience as well? Because I know in women's work, like there's so much like reconnection to your inner sexual power. Like, how does that show up for men? And how do you work through it with them?
Yeah, yeah, it's such a beautiful question. And it's something which I'm in quite an exploration around actually. So I'm gonna speak kind of like where my kind of exploration is right now, and we'll see where that takes us. And the word power in itself is another word which is, so kind of charged and loaded. And, we live in a culture where we see power in the power over like dominator model, basically force and control. And this is what so many people feel power to be. And if we look out in the world, especially when we look at figures of leadership and authority in the world, in fact, their sense of power that is there is often very disconnected from the body and very disconnected from right relationship with life. So I feel like men are in a really interesting place right now where the things that were perceived to give them power in the past, such as role, being the breadwinner, being the head of the household, or status, having a particular position in work and out in the world, all of these things are falling away now for men, and women have really come into the fore and have like really claimed their space in the world. And and it's very easy right now for men to look and say, well, it's women's fault, like if women weren't doing these things, then we would still have our thing, which is a very, very victim place, in fact, to look at it all. So there's some real work there for men. But I think what the real gift is in this, if a man is willing to look at it, is like that sense of power. If you're not getting it from the external things anymore, now it's time to turn to the internal. Now it's time to turn to the power that is a part of your innate worthiness and expression as a human being walking on this earth. But to come into relationship with that, and I actually think sexuality is the most potent place where a man can connect with this. And it's only really because of the programming and the distortion that we experience that most men actually approach their sexuality in a way that's incredibly disempowering for them. And so one of the things which I'm like deeply, deeply called to bring is initiation for men, initiation into the awareness and the skills and the techniques and the support even to come into an empowered relationship with their sexual energy. So, for most men, sex is basically this kind of race to ejaculation and then loss of energy, loss of power at that point. And so many men now are getting really caught up in like overconsumption of pornography. They're just losing their energy in something external, in something that has basically been set up to extract their money, that has nothing to do with love or intimacy or bonding, and that in fact is wiring men away from the behaviors that would support love, intimacy, and bonding, which we are all wired to want and need and long for and be nourished by. And instead their energy is diverted into like the junk food basically of sexuality rather than having a home cooked nourishing meal. So for men, if they're stuck in this kind of junk food consumption around their sexual energy without realizing it, they're really deeply disempowering themselves. And we live in a culture that celebrates it. Like, oh yeah, great, like that's what men do. And it's not. This is a deeply unhealthy programming that is running. But there is a different way with sexuality. And in tantric practice, the cock, we use the word lingam. And lingam translates, or one translation is wand of light. And I think just even that thought, that name, that potential, that the cock is not just like this sort of weird appendage that has a mind of its own and does, kind of does its own thing, and that, or that we demand something of, that a man extracts from himself of, and instead could come into a relationship with his cock where it has a wisdom and a gift, and that he could learn how to be in relationship with that and bring his sexual energy as an offering, as a healing for himself, for women, for the world, for whoever he wishes to share it with. But there is a beautiful empowerment there that can take us somewhere magical. That is where liberation can come
Yes.
into relationship with that.
Yes, oh my gosh. I think one thing that really struck me in that was the power that, like, men are so used to a society that kind of, like, grants them power innately from the outside, and that, like, difference that, like, women have started to reclaim their inner power because we didn't have any outer power. And so
Yes,
we're so right, like, oh, that's such an interesting way to look at that, and, like, of course we're further ahead because we were like, "Okay, where can we find power? Inside ourselves. Cool. Let's make that happen."
exactly, exactly,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And now it's the turn of the men, right? And now it's the turn of the men.
Yeah, yeah, and, like, and even yeah, changing the language around stuff, like, you're right, like, saying, like, this sheath of light sorry, I forget the words already, but just, like, the
Wand of
tantric
light.
wand of light, yes, but, like yes, like, "Fill me up with your light," you know? And, like, even just, like, taking the word vagina and how, like, that means sheath for a sword, like, that's not a great word, that's not an empowering word, but when you take the word yoni, right, like the Sanskrit word for vagina, like, it embodies the entire essence of femininity and this beautiful portal into the world, like, really, like, the language there is, yeah, really important to look at and to see what different cultures over the spaces of time have brought into their awareness around sexuality, like, just this whole idea of sexuality being, like, gross or disgusting or, like, shameful or wrong is really only a recent construct. When you go far enough back, it goes back into these beautiful practices, these high priestess practices, these places where it was sacred, it truly was, and people recognize that. And so, like, it's not some new age thing, it's actually really, really, really old. And that, like, can connect us to our shared humanity, I feel like. Yeah, thank you for bringing the language into that and for bringing the such a beautiful exploration of power and what it means inside of us and outside
Yeah.
of us. I love it. And so you touched on
Mm,
and I would love to dive a little bit deeper into that because it is such an important topic when we talk about men's sexuality. And like, I like that comparison of junk food to like a nourishing meal. And so, what do you see as like the biggest challenge when it comes to porn? And how can we start to change that conversation?
yeah. So, the first thing I want to say around porn is it's like, I feel the conversation that we're having about porn really needs to shift because, like, people either need to, or it's kind of like, well, I'm pro sex, so I'm pro porn and anything goes, or being kind of raising questions about porn is seen as being sex negative and kind of like it's a moral thing, and we're clutching our pearls, going, oh, no, the shame of it, the shame of it, and it's like, it is natural and healthy for us to feel excited by something sexual, right? To be stimulated by something that appeals to our eyes and that ignites our inner fire. Like, the species depends on men feeling a spark in response to something sexual, right? We wouldn't be here without it. Yeah. But what is not healthy and natural is the availability of that stimulation on a daily basis, 24/7, with increasing levels of intensity and violence being portrayed. So it's like porn has shifted from being magazines in a box under the bed to something that is streamed continuously into our world, that is available all the time. And basically, men's bodies weren't designed for this much stimulation. So in fact, men are finding themselves getting caught up in a kind of loop of seeking release. Yeah. Finding it, but then feeling depleted and then chasing an experience, chasing that dopamine hit, basically, the chemistry that's going on in the brain. But if I this I mean, so much I could say in this is it's like it's something I've been exploring and writing about quite a bit, in the last 6 months. And so just to give men a kind of energetic understanding of what's going on and to touch back into my point around vulnerability. So what I find is that for so many men, because the programming that we give men and boys really stifles their aliveness by putting them in a very narrow bandwidth of emotional range, right? So from an early age, men are told, don't cry, don't show emotion. You're only allowed to be within this acceptable bandwidth. And for most men, the only way that they can do this, or boys, is actually by creating tension in the body, right? They literally hold it in and block it down inside themselves. But life is always wanting to express itself, yeah? Aliveness is wanting to bring more aliveness. And so that energy wants to come out somewhere. And what happens for a lot of men when they hit their teenage age is like that aliveness, which again, like centuries and centuries of ejaculations and bringing us to being here at this time, right, is potent, is powerful stuff. So at a time when right, their hormones are changing, everything's moving, there's this rush of aliveness, but they're not being guided in any way how to be with it. And there's a lot of feeling happening at that time, but they're not allowed to express that feeling. And in fact, it's often a time when boys get much less affection, much less connection in the family unit from their parental figures, from their peers around them. So this, in my understanding, is one of the ways in which men become quite fixated on sex, because it's one of the very, very few places where they're allowed to express aliveness.
Mhm.
Just think about that for a moment. If the only place that you're really allowed to feel anything is in sex, then of course that's what you're going to want. You're gonna keep chasing, following, yearning for that experience. So again, this is like our system is just doing what it does, but because we don't approach it in a very conscious, mindful way, and we don't guide men in this, then this is where the distortion starts to come in. And so how I see it is many men use ejaculation as a form of release. It's like there's sensation arising in the body, there's emotional material there, they can't express it anywhere else. What do I do? Okay, well, I have a wank, I ejaculate. Wow, I get a moment of release. I get to feel clear and empty for a moment. But because the energy isn't being encouraged up into the heart, isn't being brought into consciousness, perhaps doesn't have the feedback loop of bonding connection, it just drops back down into energetically the root, where it then kind of fills up and builds again. So tension builds, emotion builds, stress builds. Oh, now I have to release it. Oh, and it drops back down. So basically, many men get stuck in a loop between the first and second chakras, first and second energy centers, which then basically feeds into a sense of addiction, because it will never be enough from that place. Whatever you're doing, it will never be enough. but your body will just keep craving more and more and more. So the way forward in this for men is learning how to move that potent energy that we want to celebrate and encourage, but to learn to move it into the whole body, to bring it into integration. And that particularly involves like learning to open the heart, and to release the dam that is around the heart that's been holding everything back, keeping everything locked down, and learning to come into what I call full spectrum sexuality, where everything is included, everything gets to flow together, and a man gets to claim his full humanity as well as the divinity that is within him.
Mm, yes. Yes, 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 yes. So one word that really caught my attention in all that was release. Like that
Mm,
concept of like, because even in women too, we're taught to release sexual energy. We're taught to give it to someone else. We're taught to perform it for someone else. And so that idea of, yeah, like, and literally the ejaculation, the original release, like it is the OG. It's out. It's literally out of you. And so, like, changing that perspective, changing that language around the word release, because so, like, one of the key things as you learn this, like, full spectrum sexuality, as you so beautifully called it, is that, like, we can bring that sexual energy back inside ourselves and we don't have to release it. And we can, and like a man learning how to bring that sexual energy back inside himself, nourish himself. That's that power you were talking about earlier. So I really wanted to touch on that word release. And just if there's one thing that you can change about your language around sexuality, it would be release. Like when you
mm.
masturbate, when you use a vibrator, when you use porn, when you jack off, like, are you looking for release or are you looking for expression? Are you looking for aliveness? Are you looking for vitality? Are you looking for energy? And like, yeah, using a different word there could mean all the difference.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's like, it's for a man coming into this different relationship with his cock, where, like, yeah, rather than sort of demanding that it do something for him, often this kind of tension release, basically, for a moment of peace. It's like coming into relationship with that and generating energy within himself, which then generates more power. And, for a man to be able to be in choice around his ejaculation rather than being driven by biological urgency, basically, which doesn't care about how connected and bonded you feel with your partner or if they've had a great experience as well, and how to be in like real intimacy and love making, even. But when a man can come into a place where he has space from that drive, it gives him more choice. And having choice gives you power, right? When you're in
Hmm.
choice in yourself, you're empowered in yourself. And that's just so much more, yeah, enlivening place to be, because then you really get to choose how you want to live, how you want to be, not just in sex, but in all of life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so, in all of these different elements that we've talked about, what do you think would be the most important action, either one or multiple, that a man can take to start to heal his relationship with his sexuality?
Mm. I think one like really, really simple thing that a man can do that he can just put in place straight away is when you feel the kind of urgency to masturbate and want to ejaculate, is actually just to take a pause and check in with yourself about what is driving this feeling. It's like, am I here because I'm feeling really juicy and alive and I want to feel more of that in myself? Or is there something sitting underneath it that I'm actually trying to kind of like manage or control through my ejaculation? Yeah, like, am I trying to get rid of a feeling here? In the same way that if we were wanting to look at our diet, we might just like have a post-it note on the fridge kind of going like, is this really what you want when you're reaching for the ice cream? Or in fact, are you trying to suppress a feeling that's there? So you just create that little bit of space for yourself. And it's like, if you truly like, yeah, this is nourishing me and enlivening and it feels really good, great, you go for it. But if you catch yourself and you're like, actually, I'm doing this from a kind of extractive place in myself, or to suppress something, or to divert something, then that will start to give you some indication about where you want to look in order to, yeah, to open, to widen the aperture of your aliveness so that you can bring more of yourself into the world in a sovereign way.
Yeah, thank you. That's such a beautiful place to start, and I think I like that that kinda speaks to almost like the sacred pause, you know, like the sacred pause of, "Wait, ask your body, ask yourself, is this actually what I want, or what do I want?" Like, it's just such a beautiful way to just anytime you're asked a question, just pause, give yourself that moment of self-reflection, because I think so many of us just act on instinct far too often. And so it's, yeah, it's just like recircuiting the brain's thought process of like, just give yourself permission to pause before you move on to the actual action after that instinct took over and said, "Oh, I want this." Because, yeah, you're right. That's true in food. That's true in sex. That's true in a lot of decisions that we make. And this could even be implemented like before a joint partnered sexual experience where, yeah, you pause and you think, okay, what do I actually want to experience here with you today?
Yeah, beautifully put.
Yeah. And so as we start to wind down this conversation, I'm curious if there's any other pieces of men's sexuality that you feel like weren't mentioned. Like is anything left to create like this full image of like what is happening in men's sexuality today? Where can men start to move into different states of awareness with their sexuality? And how can we as women kind of like hold the container for them to grow alongside us?
Mm, mm, yeah. I mean, I think we touched on the word curiosity earlier, and I feel that if there was one word that summed up the kind of various layers that were there, it is about getting curious. You know, okay, so here's the thing. There is a standard story around sex. So many people are running to a script about what sex is and how you do it. In my experience, very, very few people are actually satisfied with that script, right? Because I have never met anybody who hasn't wondered there must be more to it than this. Yeah. And there is. There is so much more to sex than most people could even begin to in their wildest imaginings. Yeah, there are realms of experience just waiting for you. Yeah. And so it's like if the script isn't working for you, this is a time to really wonder, how could I change that script? It's like what else is, rather than trying to force yourself into the script that doesn't fit. Like it's like we're trying to put on a suit that just doesn't, it's too tight, and wasn't cut for you. It's like, can you bring your curiosity to like, yeah, what do I really want here? Like, what would truly bring pleasure into this experience? And it probably looks something totally different from what you think it does. Yeah. So I really invite that for the men and also for women who love men and who want to be met by men. Bring your curiosity, because for us just to look, really ask a question, well, what does sex mean to a man? And what could be really here for him? Rather than what I see happen a lot of kind of like writing off, well, that's just how men are, or that's just what men want. It's like, let us ask ourselves, what does this actually mean to him? And what might be here for him that we could really meet together? Then that brings a different kind of conversation in and just starts opening up the potential of, yeah, meeting and being met by one another.
Beautiful. Yeah, because that's really all it is. Like, sexuality is really about meeting one another where we are and allowing our full spectrum of human emotions to come through and pleasure to come through. And, like, there's nothing more beautiful than the understanding that, like, I could cry in the middle of sex and that has nothing to do with anything. It's just there, it's just emotions coming through. And, like, having a partner, like, for me personally, like, having a partner that understands that, like, tears might come and that's okay. And it doesn't mean like I'll stop you if it's like something that we need to stop for. But honestly, having somebody just like accept and see and move through that with you is just the most beautiful thing. And that, like, yeah, curiosity of like, what did that mean for you? Like, was there a story attached to that? Or was that just pure emotion moving through? And like, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
And just last words, it's like I truly, truly believe that, at its most fundamental level, everybody is just longing to love and be loved. And that is the baseline, yeah, of it all. We just wanna love and be loved.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this conversation. The insights, the eloquence of which you speak is so beautiful. It's been an honor to speak to you. And if people wanted to work with you or find your work, how could they do so? Where do you hang out?
Well, you can go to my website, which is my name, gayatribeegan.com. I write and share my reflections on life, love, and erotic liberation on social media and particularly Facebook. Hoping to do a Substack in the new year. But yeah, so these are the main places where you can find me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. And yeah, everybody move forward with curiosity. Curiosity is the word for the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.